This is TOEFL IBT speaking test, and this test evaluates your ability to communicate in English in an academic setting. It consists of 4 tasks. Task 1, express an opinion on a familiar topic. Listening, conversation summary. The woman agrees with the proposal. She explains that many of her friends are currently looking for internships and jobs, but they often feel lost about how to get started. She says resume writing, in particular, is confusing for many students, especially those who don't have a lot of work experience. She also really likes the idea of having professionals come in to speak. She says it's one thing to hear advice from professors, but hearing from someone actually working in the field can be much more realistic and helpful. Lastly, she thinks Friday afternoon is a great choice since most students don't have classes then, so scheduling won't be a problem. Listening, lecture summary. In the lecture, the professor illustrates functional fixedness with a real-life situation. She describes a man who was trying to hang a picture in his apartment, but he didn't have a hammer. He had several heavy tools nearby, including a wrench, but didn't think to use any of them. Instead, he drove to the store just to buy a hammer. The professor says this is a clear example of functional fixedness, because the man only thought of the wrench as something for plumbing, he didn't consider using it to hammer a nail. She adds that breaking out of this mindset can help people solve problems more creatively and efficiently. Task 4. Integrated, Academic Lecture, Extended, Headphone Listening, Lecture Summary. The professor talks about how certain wild animals are adapting to life in urban environments, and how these adaptations show behavioral flexibility. She starts by discussing raccoons, which have become increasingly common in cities. Raccoons have learned to open trash bins with latches, and they tend to show up around the same time each week, right before garbage pickup, because they've learned the schedule. This behavior shows not only intelligence, but an ability to observe and adjust to human patterns. Next, she describes pigeons. In the wild, pigeons used to nest on cliffs, but in cities, they've adapted by using building ledges and rooftops instead. These areas provide similar shelter and height, and the pigeons treat them just like natural cliffs. She explains that this shift in nesting behavior is a clear example of animals using urban structures to meet their needs. The professor concludes by saying that these kinds of changes help explain how animals can survive, and even thrive, despite major changes in their environment.
I disagree with the idea that it's better to study several different subjects at once. In my experience, focusing on one subject at a time leads to better concentration and a deeper understanding of the material. When I divide my attention across multiple subjects, I often feel overwhelmed and forget key details. For instance, last semester, I tried to study biology, economics, and literature all in one day, and I ended up mixing up terms and concepts. But when I focused only on economics for a full week, I understood the theories much better and got a higher grade on the exam. Studying one subject at a time helps me stay organized, reduces mental fatigue, and improves my academic performance overall. The woman supports the idea of adding a weekly career workshop on campus. She explains that many students, including her own friends, are currently searching for internships or jobs but don't feel confident about how to apply. She believes the workshop would be helpful, especially with things like writing resumes and practicing for interviews, which students often struggle with. Another reason she supports the plan is the inclusion of guest speakers from different industries. She says hearing from professionals who are actually working in the field can give students real-world insight that they wouldn't normally get in a classroom. Finally, she thinks the timing of the workshop, Friday afternoons, is smart, because most students are free at that time and would be more likely to attend. Functional fixedness is a psychological concept that describes how people tend to see objects only in their traditional or most common use, which can limit their ability to solve problems creatively. In the lecture, the professor gives a clear example to illustrate this idea. She talks about a man who wanted to hang a picture but didn't have a hammer. Even though he had a heavy wrench nearby, he didn't consider using it to drive the nail into the wall. That's because he only viewed the wrench as a plumbing tool. As a result, he wasted time going to the store just to buy a hammer. This example clearly shows functional fixedness, because the man failed to recognize that the wrench could serve the same purpose. It highlights how this mental block can prevent people from seeing simple and effective solutions right in front of them. The professor explains that some animals have shown impressive behavioral flexibility by adapting to life in urban environments. She first talks about raccoons. In cities, raccoons have learned how to open trash bins, even those with latches, to find food. What's more interesting is that they've figured out garbage collection schedules, so they often show up just before trash is picked up. This shows that raccoons can observe patterns in human behavior and adjust accordingly. The second example she gives is pigeons. Although pigeons originally nested on cliffs in the wild, they now build their nests on the ledges of tall buildings in cities. These structures offer similar conditions, like height and shelter, so the birds treat them the same way. Both examples demonstrate how animals can modify their behavior and use artificial environments to survive, which is essential for living in rapidly changing habitats like cities.